Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am Jessica Delmar. This is the Oneness Podcast. In this episode, we're talking about the shifts occurring within our inner survival mode as it ascends into sacred mode. Specifically, I want to talk about a certain aspect of survival mode, which is freeze mode. Many people find themselves in freeze mode at this time, stuck and unable to move forward. The reason is because you find yourself at a threshold in between two worlds, if you will, and stepping into the new reality is one that involves a lot of courage, patience, and ease. Not understanding how to navigate stepping through this doorway is what keeps many people frozen, if you will. So you want to really look at survival mode as a whole unit. And if you are dominantly in freeze mode, you want to ask yourself, how do the other layers of survival mode feed into the freeze? In other words, how are you fighting or resisting your ability to move into what's next? That's your fight mode feeding into your freeze mode. How are you avoiding or running away from what is being asked of you in order to move into what's next? That's your flight mode feeding into your freeze mode. How are you putting yourself last in priority, or how are you placing other people's needs above your own, which only prevents you from moving forward? That's your fawn mode feeding into your freeze mode. And so what's the energetic formula for stepping through and moving through this freeze mode? When you dissolve old layers of the self, you naturally open the doorway for becoming something new. But how you step into that new state of self is foreign, confusing, and unknown for most people. Even though this new state feels a lot bigger and more expansive than ever before, it is technically no different from all the other times that you've stepped into something new in your life. You already know the path, even if that leap in between may seem a lot bigger. We're learning to navigate this new movement forward by embracing what it means to live right now. And so in this episode, we're going to be dissecting 4 themes or fears within freeze mode so that you can better understand why you're here. Then we're going to talk about how to shift energy and take the next steps forward. So the first theme or fear is the fear of failure. The second theme is the unknown. The third theme is trust. And the fourth is emotion. With all of the changes shifting around us, many people are finding themselves in freeze mode, not able to take steps forward to achieve goals. Another way that this manifests is through the feeling of wandering, not sure what next steps to take, feeling overwhelmed with what comes next, and very uncertain or unsure of themselves and their path. The reason that we feel frozen is because we feel the discomfort of change and the trigger of instability. You find yourself in front of a big doorway, and now it's about getting through the door. The inability to understand how to move through the door is what drives freeze mode at this time. And many people find themselves waiting for the next set of directions in order to move forward. But the next set of directions is dependent upon how you move through this freeze. It's almost like a final farewell, if you will, to what you know of as survival mode. This does not mean that you will not still continue to utilize the tools of survival mode when it's needed going forward, but it does mean that you are no longer initiating survival mode within yourself as a default way of existing in the world, especially when you don't need to be utilizing survival mode. The thing about the old world is that people go around in survival mode all the time, even during times that they don't need to be utilizing it. And so the body has learned to adapt to being in constant survival mode. And this big shift is about how can I release that state of being and now shift into something more open, something more allowing, something at ease, my natural state of being, and only utilize survival mode when it's needed. For most people whose bodies have been in a state of survival mode for such a long time, releasing that grip is going to be very difficult because the body is holding on to it as a program, as how it's supposed to be and exist. But finding yourself face to face with this doorway is about leaving one world behind and taking a giant leap into this new world. Energetically, the shift occurs fully within you. It's about you letting go. It's about you releasing that grip. And one of the final tests is your ability to say goodbye to the ways that you hold yourself back, primarily through fear. So the question is, can you overcome the ways that you're holding yourself back from taking this leap? This is a leap into the unknown, and it's certainly very scary. You can't see where you're leaping into. You just know that there's an internal feeling rising that says to let go. Cognitive function is shifting from distrust to trust, survival to sacred, meaning almost every ounce of your body is telling you what direction you desire to go in, but the final battle is the mind. But it's actually less of a battle and more of an understanding. It's more even of a true awakening. If we can just understand how it mentally works, how this shift mentally works, what are the steps, then our minds would be more inclined to get on board. It would soften and ease up a little bit. But right now, because we're on the edge about to take that leap, our minds are kind of working overtime to keep us safe, to keep us held back, if you will, in our survival mode. And so we really have to work and massage where our minds are coming from in order to ease the body to move forward. The mind holds on to what was, despite the body moving forward into what can be. And so we need to be able to soothe the mind into a place of courage and calm in order to move forward. But what your spirit wants you to know is that despite all of this change and instability, a deeper purpose is calling to you. But if you're stuck in the discomfort of stepping outside of yourself, then you will never feel what that inner calling can lead you to. It feels like strings that keep us frozen in place only because their grasp is so tight upon us. The minute that we break those strings or cut through those strings is also the minute that we fall forward fast into our future paths. There is a momentum of energy being cultivated within our freeze mode right now as we meet the resistance of it in our present moment. It's as if we're pulling a string that's attached to something and we've gone as far as we can, and now we're just pulling at the resistance of it. But if you think about it, if someone comes over and cuts that string, you're going to fall forward so fast. And so this is really the momentum being generated right now, meaning there's a whole bunch of energy happening in our bodies, between our bodies and our minds, that's going, I want to move forward, but I can't. I want to move forward, but I can't. I want to move forward, but I can't, right? And so there is such a large amount of energy being generated in that very desire of wanting to move forward, even if you feel like you can't. It's like tires stuck in the mud, right? It's spinning out. But eventually, all of that energy will give way and it will propel you forward in massive ways the moment that you let go of the ways that you feel stuck right now. When we find ourselves in freeze mode, we are stuck in between the past and the future. And in many ways, much of our fears come forth from our past, which binds us in our present moment, unable to move forward into the future. And so we want to talk about 4 common aspects or fears that keep us bound within freeze mode at this time specifically, which is preventing a lot of people from moving forward. It's creating that sort of spinning out of the wheels right now. And this includes failure, the unknown, trust, and emotion. And so we're going to talk more about each one of those. Right now, we're being asked to confront and break down the walls, especially of those 4 things, in order to break through this sort of freeze mode, and so that we can start taking the next steps into the next stages of our experience. The truth is that we always have everything we need in every moment. And when we feel that we do not, we simply must endure a process that challenges us otherwise. We are equipped with everything that we need. And at this time, the thing we need most is the feeling of stability, especially as we feel everything is being shaken loose and turned upside down. But how you feel the stability you are looking for is found in the very fears that keep you frozen. So as you are learning how to move through the frozen state, you're integrating so much stability, so many of the things you're wanting to integrate, you're wanting to learn, and you're needing to learn to be in alignment with a stronger version of yourself, a more vulnerable version of yourself, a more adaptable version of yourself, a more courageous version of yourself, a more flexible version of yourself. All of that is on the other side of the door. And so you're integrating such large amounts of that, of who you are becoming right now as you move through this very intense time. So let's talk about these 4 fears or aspects one by one. The first being failure. Failure is a fear that prevents us from seeing our success. It's not meant to stand in your way, but it's meant to show you how you are standing in your own way. When we learn that life is neither about success nor failure, but it's more about trial and error, we let go of the need to control the outcomes of our life and instead begin to lean into the experience of our life. We can never determine whether we fail or succeed before we even start. But the problem is when we develop a fear of failure that harnesses a frozen aspect of ourselves, then in many ways in our life, we fail to even start. So we never know what the outcome will be because that fear of failure prevents us from taking those steps in the first place. And so if we shift our mindset to simply, quote unquote, trying it out for the sake of the experience, instead of, will this path lead me to fail or succeed, then we will more often find that even our errors are teaching us valuable lessons along the way. Again, when we approach the path from a place of trial and error and say, well, let's just try this out for the sake of the experience, then the likelihood of us moving along that path is much greater than if we're approaching the path from a place of whether it will take us into success or failure. We often think of failure as definitive and definite, but it is neither. Failure is simply a way that we control an outcome of success. And if the two are always tied, failure and success, then you are always going to be bound in either direction, failure or success. One cannot exist without the other. And so letting go of the fear of failure is about embracing the errors of your life experience and not putting so much pressure on yourself to succeed all the time. We are meant to make errors in life. Otherwise, we would not be able to craft experiences that we so pleasantly love. Do not measure your life through the lens of success and failure. Instead, Be present in the experience of life right now, showing you that it can never be a success nor a failure, but simply just is in the wholeness of the experience. What you make of life is not through the lens of success or failure, but through the lens of fear or love. Because even in success, you can feel failure, and even in failure, you can feel success. But if you experience life through trial and error, you simply move with how fear and love move you, so that you can learn to become fully present with your life and expand your experiences, rather than expanding your judgments or measurements of self-worth. Success and failure are only measures and judgments of worth, but trial and error is how we live life to the fullest that it offers us. So embrace life, including the trials and the errors, and let it show you all that you can become. The second aspect that we're working with right now is the unknown. And a lot of people, I'd say most people, have a fear of the unknown. But here's a good way of looking at the realm of unknown. All that you are right now was once all that you did not know. All that you are right now was once everything unknown, because every next moment is always unknown. And yet, even though every next moment is unknown, we step forward. We always step forward. So why are we programmed to fear the unknown when we step into it every single day? The answer is because looking too far ahead is what makes us overlook the now. And we fear the unknown because we are looking too far ahead. And so when we're busy looking 10 steps ahead, or even 100 steps ahead, or even 5, 10, 20 years ahead, the unknown, that area of unknown, looks far wider than if you were to take a look at what's unknown right in front of us right now. So, much like failure, the fear of the unknown is an issue of control. And if we cannot control how things unfold for us, 10 steps from now, 100 steps from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we often shy away from making those decisions right now. But how realistic is it to be able to control 10 steps ahead, 100 steps ahead, 5 years ahead, 20 years ahead, right? It's unrealistic, and yet we put that pressure on ourselves to control the outcome of our steps 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And so what Spirit is asking us to do is just reel it in a little bit and bring the focus back to our present moment. The fear of the unknown often takes us into irrational states of mind because of the endless what-if questions, what-ifs, that we conjure through our mind. And so it's not that we don't need to have a plan for 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but it's that we're looking at it in a different way. And we're shifting the way that that path unfolds for us from a place of control. Again, remember the ego shifts and those perspective shifts that come forth from the ego shifts. And so we're shifting the way that the path unfolds for us from a place of control into a place of clarity. And so it's about taking the steps from places of clarity rather than taking steps from places of control. Overcoming the fear of the unknown is about sinking into all of the ways that you feel uncertainty right now. Because when we do not feel certainty or stability in our present moment, we reach for future stability and certainty to ensure that once we get there, we are taken care of. But what this eventually does is it further reinforces the sense of uncertainty and instability of the present moment. Because when we are constantly seeking to stabilize a future that does not yet exist, we lose focus and strength in the now, which is not only the only thing that exists, but is the foundation that you take with you into your future steps. And so when you seek to stabilize a future foundation, but fail to tend to the foundation you're standing on right now, then the house can never be built as strong as you want it to, right? The house will only be built as strong as the foundation you pour into right now. And this is a shift from the unfolding path being made from a place of control versus clarity, because if your foundation is clarity right now, then you have such a clear vision of how that house is going to be built upon that solid and strong foundation right now. And along the way, along the path, a lot of things can change, and there can be a lot of different possibilities and potentials, and you're more likely to move your way through those possibilities and potentials and ebbs and flows in a way where you're following your clarity, you're following the inspiration through your clarity versus trying to control the outcomes. Because the house will take very different shape when you are trying to build a house over a weaker foundation and you're trying to then control everything that comes forth from it versus building the house on a very solid foundation of clarity. And then following and fine-tuning that clarity going forward as you're building the house. It's also important to understand that there are certain times of existence that a projection of future stability is and was necessary. And a pouring of foundation could be applied both here in the present and there in the future. But it can only be done when there is a lot of energetic foundational strength in ages of cosmic stability. In other words, density, meaning a person could tend to the stability of both the future and the present because an overarching theme of cosmic stability, in other words, density or earthly weight, was taking place and being supported energetically. But it's also important to understand that the age of stability or density, earthly density, is shifting. And in this shift, the very forces that upheld energetic stability are becoming forces of liability and vulnerability. And so an example is what the guides were showing me was a lot of our grandparents and even parents were held within this greater cosmic womb, if you will, that supported this type of stability. It supported this past, present, and future stability because of the density. So think of like a teardropped ball with sand in it. The sand is going to serve as sort of a weight in the bottom and uphold that teardropped ball in a certain position, right? It'll hold it upright. It'll hold it standing upright. But with the way that cosmic energies are shifting, that teardropped ball is now kind of shifting to the side and kind of destabilizing what was once stable. And this is why it feeds into a lot of the old thought programs and beliefs and how it's shifting from one way of thought into a completely different way of thought. Again, this is because the energies are destabilizing, adding more emphasis to air rather than earth. This does not mean that grounding and stabilization is not possible, but it does mean that what we stabilize in is shifting. And in order to reach this new place of stability, we must unearth or uproot much of our old ways that we rooted into to achieve old world stability. So this includes our old earth foundations of money, power, and structure. And another analogy or vision is think of a tree that must uproot from maybe the valley, and it's uprooting in order to ground itself into a new higher elevation on the mountain. And so during this shift, we must learn to ground into what is unknown instead of fearing it, because the very things that we fear is what is teaching us where the changes are occurring. And so if we can ground into the things that we are fearing, then it's sort of taking us into the path of the change. And this is because our fears take us out of our comfort and stability and into the unknown. As we face more and more of the unknown, we are being asked to lean into it instead of fear it, so that ultimately we can feel stable despite the chaos of a massively shifting landscape all around us. The third aspect or fear at this time is trust and our ability to trust. As our worlds get shaken up, many people begin to trust themselves less and less. Not trusting yourself is a major reason that we get stuck in freeze mode, unable to take action steps forward. But the reason people lack trust in themselves is because past decisions or choices made through past judgments may not have worked out for them the way that they wanted it to, and the way that they interpret these decisions are based on whether the choice was right or wrong. But having a solid black and white perception of your choices, being right or wrong, makes it much harder to be in flow with an ever-changing world that will always serve you things in between. So what you must know is that even if things may not have worked out for you the way that you wanted it to, it does not necessarily mean that a wrong decision was made. The problem is that people hold on to past judgments that almost always influence how they perceive the world in a black and white way, a right or a wrong way, and also influences the way that they feel that they must move forward. But what we want to tell you is that everything is shifting, meaning all of the reasons that you had to judge your past are no longer becoming the reasons that you move forward. You cannot continue to uphold who you are based upon who you were. And you cannot continue to expect your life to unfold in the way that it did in the past. You must always hold an open space in your now present moment to allow judgment to neutralize and free you from your past. The reason is because you cannot be bound to your past and still be open to a future of possibility. You must let go to step into future potential, and this means letting go of how you uphold your past mistakes. Trusting yourself should not be based on how you make decisions. This is important. Again, trusting yourself should not be based upon how you make decisions. But trusting yourself should be about being in commitment to yourself regardless of what you go through. Trusting yourself is trusting how you move through your path, not how you make decisions upon your path, but how you move through your path. So, regardless if you make good or bad decisions, trusting yourself means allowing yourself to make those decisions and be constantly learning and lifting from whatever decision you make. And whatever the outcome is, you can still trust yourself to move through it without being frozen in the judgment of whether it was a right or a wrong decision. That's so powerful. Again, whatever the outcome is, you can still trust yourself to move through it without being frozen in the judgment of whether it was a right or a wrong decision. Placing the right or wrong decision upon yourself only further reiterates our sense of freeze mode. But when we let that pressure go and instead become more present with the moment that we're in, whether we are in the moment of a good or a bad decision, we realize that we can only ever move through wherever it is that we are. And so, trust yourself to move through your path one step at a time, more than you trust the outcome of a decision as being right or wrong. The inability to trust the self is what keeps us frozen and is always based upon past decisions. The fear of not wanting to repeat those decisions feeds into a fear of failure. The fear of trusting ourselves is always caught up in a backward motion. It is a fear of the past and not wanting to repeat those past mistakes. The fear of failure is also a fear of the past and not wanting to repeat those past mistakes. And so essentially, again, all of the fears that we have of the future are fears of the past that keep us frozen in the present moment, unable or not allowing us to move forward. Overcoming the fear of trusting ourselves means shifting the mindset so that we can look forward with an open and allowing mind. Inability to trust comes forth from a closed mind and heart, which is about protecting yourself from the mistakes of a future based on the mistakes of your past. Also, when you have a fear of trusting yourself, it often means that you have a fear of trusting the world, only reinforcing how closed you become, not only towards yourself, but towards the world too. Overcoming the fear of trusting ourselves means that we must tend to ourselves more in the present moment to instill more softness, more love, and more respect. Not being able to trust yourself often means that a lack of respect for yourself has been developed. So learn to let go of control and be patient with how you're moving through life. You must learn to be present with yourself so that how you show up for yourself can begin reflecting softness, grace, love, and respect. And the last freeze mode aspect or fear that we have within freeze mode is emotion, the fear of emotion. A big part of freeze mode is feeling an overwhelm of emotion that prevents us from wanting to move into that emotion. It's like a wave that we feel coming before it comes. Many times, in anticipation of that wave of emotion, we shut down so that we don't draw in or drown in the emotion itself. So this wave of emotion can often be felt as overwhelm or just an overwhelming feeling, encompassing many emotions all at once to the point where it just feels overwhelming all around. Freeze mode is our ability to avoid becoming part of that overwhelming wave of feeling. Essentially, there is a large aspect of avoidance nature in or within freeze mode, and it's mostly in avoidance of feeling. But what we want to tell you about this overwhelming wave of feeling is that it only feels overwhelming because you have not yet learned to move with it. For example, in the ocean, when a big wave comes, a surfer can anticipate it coming from afar. They get into position and ready themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually before the wave arrives. And through experience, surfers learn to move with the ocean to catch and ride that wave. And when they learn this, the exhilaration of the experience becomes something that they desire to fulfill over and over and over again. However, if a person is unable to move with the ocean and anticipate the feeling of the wave and when to catch it, when it comes, it can overwhelm a person or overcome a person and even toss and turn them under the surface of the water in very dangerous and debilitating ways. Moving with emotion is very similar. However, the wave of emotion that the future often brings into the present moment is kind of like going surfing at night. You can't quite see the extent of the wave coming at you because of the vast unknown or darkness, if you will, of the future. Because of this, you must be able to go inward and feel your connection with the energy flow of life. The energy of life is always pulsating waves towards our present now moment, so that we can feel the anticipation of something coming ahead for us that is building our awareness into. And this allows us to prepare emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually in our now moment to get ready to step into that greater energy unfolding for us. And so you must learn to go inward and trust yourself through your now moment present experiences. The more that you do this, the more that you will understand what the meaning of these internal waves are and how to move with them. You must learn to lean into your other senses that also heighten during these exact moments. Emotion is just one of them. When we feel a wave of overwhelming emotion, it's often telling us that there is something big that we must prepare for in our present moment. It is signaling a path that is being created, but the path always comes forth from within us first. The space must first be made within us to then be actualized in physical manifestation. And so preparing ourselves emotionally in the present moment when these big waves of future emotion arrive is what prepares us in many ways for the future unfolding for us. If we don't move ourselves through the emotional wave of energy, we most likely keep ourselves stuck, because it's in our ability to move through that emotional energy that is the very act of making space for us to move forward. It is offering us an opportunity to make space, to soften, and to rest up in order to energetically be ready to meet whatever greater future inspiration, calling, or manifestation is trying to generate momentum here and now in order to push us into it. Overcoming the fear of emotion is about addressing and honoring however emotion shows up for you in each and every moment. Because if you are unable to handle or process how everyday emotions show up for you, then you will most likely shut down or not be able to handle these bigger waves of emotional future energy showing up to help you direct your future path right now. And that's what came through for this episode. Head on over to my newsletter site, sign up for the newsletter. You'll receive written transmissions to all of these podcast episodes. Read the written transmission for this video because there's a lot more exclusives in the written transmission. For example, within this emotional aspect, I talk about 4 things that you can try when you do feel this overwhelming wave of emotion in your present moment. And if it becomes too much for you to handle, instead of going into freeze mode, try these 4 things to help move you through the emotion and allow that emotion to be momentum to push you into the future instead of getting stuck in freeze mode. I also offer inner reflection for each of these 4 fears or aspects of freeze mode so that you can deepen your understanding of why you might be holding these things within yourself, and it will help you more deeply reflect, more deeply unfold or unravel that information within you. I'll post the link to the newsletter below in the description of this episode. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of your support. If you have a question that you want me to answer, feel free to email me your questions. I'll post my email address in the description of this episode as well. I'll see you in the next episode. Oneness, love, and peace be with you.